Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today, December 12, 2012. This webinar we're going to be talking about tips and challenges in expanding LEP limited English proficiency capacity in different text contexts, and we have a very esteemed panel. My background in language access is since I got out of law school about 15, 17 years ago. I've been doing language advocacy both at the local level and at the national level, working with a lot of legal aid programs and nonprofits in bringing in language access capacity. And since I've been working in technology for about 12 years, looking at how technology can minimize the barrier, I will let my other co-panelists introduce themselves. We have a very esteemed panel here. So Jeff?
Yeah, this is Jeff Hogue at Legal Assistance of Western New York. I'm a technology coordinator out here in Western New York.
And John?
Hi, this is John Freeman in St. Paul, Minnesota. I'm the supervising attorney at Legal Services State Support, and we're the statewide support office for legal aid programs in Minnesota.
Dennis?
Hi, this is Dennis Rios from Chicago, Illinois. I'm with Illinois Legal Aid Online, and I'm the Spanish Content and Outreach Coordinator.
Thank you. And Tony?
Hi, this is Tony Liu. I am the Citizenship Works Project Coordinator for the Immigration Advocates Network, and also, I guess, technically a staff person at Pro Bono as well.
Thanks. And Liz?
Hi, everyone. I'm Liz Keefe. I'm the LawHelp Program Manager at Pro Bono, and I'm based in San Francisco.
Thank you. So the plan is we're going to start with Jeff and then go down in order of appearance and show a smorgasbord of different projects that are looking at creating different language content in different platforms. And then at the end, we're going to open it up for people who have questions, raise their hand, and have maybe a little bit of discussion. I will be moderating, so to try to keep everybody on time. And please, like Sandra said, send us your questions via the question or the chat, and we'll be responding dynamically to that as we go. So Jeff.
All right, thanks, Claudia. Thanks, everybody, for attending. So Claudia actually helped inspire this line of thought, at least for me, of whether there is a sort of new cutting-edge technology that can help us deliver legal information more effectively in foreign languages. And then I thought, you know, legal jargon is like a foreign language, so I wonder if these same tools can basically translate legal jargon into plain English as if it were you're going from Spanish to English, which I'm just thrilled to say I don't think anyone else on the planet, if they have thought about this, they haven't published it, so I feel just so excited to think that there's something that maybe we can be literally the first people to attack. So go ahead to the next one. What I'm going to talk about fairly briefly is methods of translation that are out there right now, the concept of human versus machine translation. We'll focus in on machine translation and then focus even sharper on this technology called translation memory, and then think about some ways that we can use it in the justice community. I'm going to go through the slides fairly quickly, leave lots of time for questions and discussion at the end, I think, because I want to respond to what you guys want me to talk more about, as otherwise I'll just prattle on. So let's go ahead and go on to the next one. Okay, so we all know that things are changing in our country, and I think some programs who haven't really seen populations where a lot of the folks coming to them speak languages other than English as their primary language, and we're already really busy turning away folks who we'd like to help. And it turns out that you know, that's putting a lot of pressure on us to come up with new resources. And the question that I'm asking is, how can we use technology to relieve some of that pressure, and is there technology out there that we can work together on to expand to meet the need? Okay, so actually, I'll zoom in when we get to them, but there's lots of technologies that are out there to do translation. Go ahead to the next one. And the different methods, they really vary on how much they rely on humans and how much they rely on technology. And that's actually the big division in the sort of taxonomy of tools that are out there. Go on to the next one. So people like Maria Minlin out at Transcend Translations in California are awesome. I think you could give them almost any language to translate, and they could do it. They also have people who do this as their job. They have a desk, they have a chair, they have a computer, they have payroll. They're a real operation that specializes in translation, and it's hard to beat that. They're terrific. They also know plain language, so they can do both hard things. They can translate things into plain language, which our community still needs to work on, and into foreign languages. And someone at one of the sessions at NLADA pointed out that if you first translate your English documents into plain language, you're going to have a much easier time effectively translating those documents into foreign languages. And those skills are terrific, but they're a little pricey considering how cheap we all are in our community. And when we have gotten grant money to buy consulting time, it fills up very quickly, to the point that now we've said, oh, when we buy consulting time as part of one of our plain language or language access grants, we want to train you how to do it. We don't want to. You can't just dump things in the hopper for a professional translator to give you back, because we need to expand our capabilities and not just treat them as machines that do our translation. Now, at the other end of the scale, you have tools that have very little human input. They don't have expert translators with lots of experience. They're machines. And that's terrific, but we know that machines translate things into sometimes amusing versions of the original. And while they can, save time and money, they still need to be reviewed by a human. And generally there's a cost, a software cost or a training cost to using the technology. So go ahead. So this is actually called machine translation among the folks who specialize in software tools to do translation. I'm calling it mechanized because I think that's because I want to, and because machine is used in another context. I think mechanized gives you an idea of what we mean when we talk about MT. Mechanized gives you the image that you dump something in the top of the machine and coming out the bottom is your translation. This is the concept that you can feed it a document. At some point you'll be able to feed it an entire video. You may know already that YouTube can do transcripts from your video, for instance. And this is basically no human contact. The mechanized portion is a machine doing its job, and it spits out a translation. We know that they can be silly, the translations. They don't necessarily, word-for-word translation will give you gobbledygook syntax when the language you're translating into has a different syntax. And then sometimes, the translation of a word itself might be different given the context. Our context, of course, usually being the law. And mechanized translation doesn't tend to do a good job of that. Then I categorize everything else into computer-assisted translation. And that just means that you've used software or a computer in some way to help you perform the translation. That's really, at this point, it's all computer plus human. So go ahead. So this is machine or mechanized translation. This is no human being edited what appeared on the right side of the screen here. We dumped text into Google Translate, the web-based version, and out on the right came a translation. I don't speak Spanish. I'm told that there's this is not a perfect translation, but that's it. That's a great example. So, well, I don't want to steal anybody else's thunder, so we'll leave that at that. A human obviously would have to look at that and fix it. Now this next slide, this is translation memory. What this does is, rather than do a word-for-word translation, it has it has this sort of chart that you see on the right. You've got language 1 and language 2. And it can look for whole phrases that have been translated. So it'll, assuming that your input is that little white box, it'll say, I have a white box. Can I find a phrase that's been from language 1 that fits? For instance, if you don't go to court, your case can be dismissed. Might be an entire phrase that's the white box. And then it looks in language 2 for a piece of translation that's been done before and says, aha, we know we've done this before. Someone's checked this translation. We're going to just pull this from a database of already translated words. And then that whole segment is actually replaced. So you're not replacing the word, you're really replacing language segments. And then you solve the context problem and whatnot. The hard part here is that somebody's got to do the initial intelligent translation into a segment in another language. And I submit that at the moment that still needs to be a human in order to do that well. And if you add up all the possible segments, you're talking about a lot of work. So let's go on. Just so you know, there's translation memory software out there. We are evaluating these for a report that we're going to share with the whole community. And if you have feedback about evaluation, you should let us know right away. Go ahead to the next one. Let's see. So, and we want to know if translation memory is going to help us create non-English documents that are better quality, that are consistent across programs across the country, and then whether we can translate into plain language. Next one. Oops, I just lost it for a second. Obviously, well, we'll skip that. The advantages of, let's go to the next one. We really want to know, as we do our analysis, of whether this is actually going to make sense in the long run. I will be reaching out to the community after we generate our report to look at, basically what our conclusion so far is, if y'all want to use translation memory and we want to build that database of segments together, we can be the best translators on the planet. Otherwise, I think our option is to wait for technology to catch up and get better for mechanized translation reviewed by a human. Let's go, next one. All right, so you should keep an eye out for the translation software report that we're going to be putting out. And for those of you who are skeptical about the development of mechanized translation, you should look up the demonstration done by Rick Rashid in China, where he does not speak Chinese, but he stood on stage, spoke into a mobile device, and his English words were translated into, I believe it was Mandarin Chinese, almost instantaneously, both written and oral, and it reorganized his words and his syntax so that it was as close to Star Trek's universal translator as we've seen. That's not ready yet, but we're going to have a decision to make about what software we decide to use as a community. And I'm done.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. So I am going to transfer control to John Freeman. And John is going to share with us a new project that we're working on the advocacy world related to language access.
Okay, I believe I'm showing my screen now. Is that
Yes.
right? Okay.
Yes.
This is John Freeman in Minnesota. I'm at the Legal Services State Support Office, and we're a project of the Minnesota Legal Services Coalition. And we have been working with Pro Bono Net, specifically Claudia Johnson, on an LEP complaint resource center. This was a project that was funded by the Skadden Arps law firm. Last year they developed a new program called the FLOM Incubator Grant Program that's available to former Skadden Fellows, and Claudia and I both happened to fall into that category and talked about coming up with a project together that would have some benefit for my state, Minnesota, but also would be a national resource. And so we've been working together throughout on this, and are really at the point today to sort of announce and launch this website. So this is just an introduction, and this also is what our outreach materials look like. So the information that's included on this website, and you'll see the web address at the top there, and it will be repeated later, is information about the law and legal rights, introducing people to what LEP law is all about. A complaint that's in an interactive format. There's also a PDF for those, I guess, who don't like to interact, but there's an interactive format available to you. And there's information about the process, what you expect after filing a complaint. So I'm going to jump over to the site now. Oops. Well, jump might have been a strong word. Okay, I'm getting there. All right, so this is what the website looks like, and again, this was developed together with our office and with Pro Bono Net. And you'll see some editing tools here, and that's just because I'm an administrator, but this is basically what it would look like to you. Anyone, I'll just tell you right now, anyone who's interested in joining the site, right now you can do so by joining our advocate statewide website, which is projusticemn.org. If you sign up there, then you'll have access to this site because this is really a sub-site of that advocate website. Eventually, we'd like to have separate membership for this site, and that's something that we're working on now. So I just want to walk you through the basics of what we have here. So for somebody, and actually I should stress that this is a tool that's designed for attorneys and advocates who are helping people with complaints to federal agencies or, in Minnesota's case, to state agencies on language access issues. So this all stems from Title VI of the Civil Rights Act and the national origin component, which includes language access. And there is a complaint process for agencies that get federal funding, and that's really what this website focuses on. Somebody who has a language access violation issue can also, of course, file a lawsuit, and lawsuits really aren't the focus of this site. It's really about the administrative complaint process. So the site is broken up into a few sections, and we've worked together with Pro Bono Net on this, and they've done some really great job getting this all set up. So somebody who's very new to this can get very basic information here with this new expand collapse section, so they can see here a definition of who LEP persons are. What the laws are, we have much more information on this, and you can see that it's cross-linking within the site to other sections where these laws are actually located. Who this applies to, what language access services need to be provided, so there's some information about that. How these complaints arise, we have examples that come from actual complaints that we've also collected onto the website of where noncompliance with Title VI has been found, and there are references to those complaints, and where there was probable noncompliance as well. So this may be very helpful if somebody thinks that they're seeing a language access issue and wants to see if there's some precedent for considering it as such, although each of these cases, as we emphasize, are very fact-dependent. And we have more information about that on the site. And then there's a very helpful checklist for coverage under Title VI that was developed by the Department of Justice. There wasn't much more that we could say about this in terms of just a quick walkthrough of whether the situation and the person in question and the agency in question together fall under the rubric of Title VI. So we just link out to that. And then there's a short bit of information about lawsuits. As I said at the beginning, this website is about the complaint process as opposed to lawsuits. So that's the basic information. I want to emphasize about this section and actually about the entire website is that this really is a work in progress, and there's a lot of collective wisdom out there, and we've done our best that we can in researching this, but I think there's a lot more that can be added and there are changes that can be made, and I will include my contact information at the end, but I really encourage people to provide us feedback, specific resources, corrections, etc. So the library component of the website is called LEP in Law, and we've broken that up into primary law, which we saw a preview of before. So within here we have statutes, There is some Minnesota-specific information because we're developing it in part for Minnesota, but of course these rights stem from federal law, and most of the information here is really specific to federal law, and we can certainly add other states' information if you'd like us to. So we have case law in here as well. The Bill Clinton executive order that really got a lot of this started and helped clarify that language access is part of what's meant by national origin in the Civil Rights Act. Cases, statutes, other laws in an outline format, and then the legal manual. Also in the library, we have information about the complaint process. We encourage people up front to, if they're ready to file a complaint, to just go to the file a complaint section, and there's more information there. But we also want to give people an overview of the process. There are a number of legal overviews. A lot of this has been collected from work that's already been done. Some of it is, was developed in Minnesota but is relevant to federal law, and some of it is developed by other agencies. So we're linking out to those as appropriate. We do have some good resources, I think, in terms of that we've researched ourselves in terms of the interview and investigation process. So, for example, we have sample questions for discovering possible violations. I'm not going to focus on every resource here, but here are some questions that just can kind of help you get at whether there may be a language access issue at issue, and questions that you can ask your client or prospective client, or that you can ask yourself in kind of developing a complaint. We also have a complaint form tip sheet, which is similar. It includes things that are required and things that you probably want to include when you're completing a complaint. But the interview itself tries to prompt people with that information as well. So going back to the library, we also have information about LEP plans. The federal funding recipients should be developing these plans. Violations of the LEP plans, if somebody, these complaints can arise whether there is an LEP plan or not, and they can arise whether it seems to fall outside the plan or not. But clearly in cases where they're not following, the agency is not following its own plans, that can be very good proof of an LEP violation. So we're collecting those. We have quite a lot of them, as well as guidance for agencies on how they develop these plans. So we have them for the United States and for Minnesota. We can add more of these as you see them. Members to the website can also add their own resources, and we'll get those approved up on the site. And I should mention, for those of you familiar with the Pro Bono Net Advocate site platform, although this has sort of a different design look to it, that platform does underlie, it is the underlying infrastructure of this website. So it has the advantages of being able to share resources between those sites and having familiar administrative tools such as adding a resource, adding a folder, etc. And then we've also collected a few resources for clients. This site is not intended for clients, and it is mainly password protected, and that's why I say if you want to join it for now, go to projusticemn.org, and eventually we'll try to implement direct membership access here. But there may be some things that people want to contribute that they consider strategic or otherwise don't want to share publicly. But for people who are representing clients in these issues, they may want to print out these resources and give them to their clients. So we tried to collect what we saw as some of the better kind of plain language explanations of the law. So that's it for the library. Under filing a complaint, we have some introductory information. And this is basically if somebody goes right to file a complaint, it directs them to other parts of the site if there are specific areas of introductory information that they want to look at. Then we have a section, of course, on filing the complaint, and then about the investigation process. So we did develop a Hot Docs interview that's hosted on Pro Bono Net's LawHelp Interactive server. There's also, and we've based this on the Department of Justice form. There's also a link to the printable version of that form, as well as versions in other languages. So the Hot Docs interview, I think I have it open here. So for those of you who've done Hot Docs interviews before, this will seem pretty familiar. but it walks somebody through the essential pieces of the complaint based on the Department of Justice form. So it's going to, let me back up there, it's going to ask about the agency, whether they're a recipient of federal funding, whether they have an LEP plan and how it addresses the situation. In this case, my fictitious agency, or Garrison Keillor's fictitious agency, did have an LEP plan and violated that plan, and we've discussed that here. So information about the client, obviously the language, fluency in the language, the community of people who speak the language. These go to the factors that are used in determining whether LEP rights arise and whether LEP rights might have been violated. Then there's more information about the discrimination itself. I won't go through this in too much detail because everybody can go and take a look at this. And then if there are other complaints, they can indicate that here, and they're going to want to provide information about what the resolution of those complaints was, etc. Once I get to the end, it's going to generate a document for me. And to save your time, I've done this sort of like a cooking show. There's the document. So this is the one we were just looking at. It's going to start with some general information for the attorney or the advocate who's helping the person, kind of how they go about actually filing the complaint, what the process is from there forward. And so that's theirs to keep. And then after that, we have the complaint itself, which has pulled all that information that we typed into the interview and added it into these blanks. And then at the end, there's a release that we were able to select the language for. So we've selected Spanish because in this case, the fictitious client is Spanish-speaking. And it includes everything that they need for releasing information so that the agency that's investigating the claim can investigate it with their permission. So, as I mentioned, there's also a printable form for those of you who just want to use that. And then there's information about what comes next. So some introductory information about how the process works. And then there are some legal manuals that are developed by the Department of Justice that are very helpful in this regard as well. So wrapping up here, we've also linked out to pages that have large amounts of LEP information. So obviously LEP.gov and the National Language Access Advocates Network have great resources, and so we're trying to link out to those here. And then, as I mentioned, you can certainly contact me with any corrections, enhancements, criticisms, etc. But there's also a feedback form if you prefer to do that. So we've used SurveyMonkey for this, but I've managed, it's taking a minute here, but we've managed to embed it into the site itself, so you can complete the survey right from the site, as you can see here. And then we'll get those surveys and respond to them and try to make the website itself responsive to your ideas. So that really summarizes the website, which is, I guess, officially launching right now as we speak. My contact information I've included here as well, and maybe can go into the chat too. And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you, John. So that's more of an example of how technology can be used for advocacy purposes. And we are now going to move to Dennis Rios, who is at Illinois Legal Aid Online. Let me bring back my slides. Okay, Dennis.
All right, thank you, Claudia. Okay, so hello everyone, my name is Dennis Rios. I'm with Illinois Legal Aid Online, and I'm going to talk to you about our new Spanish website that we just launched in January of this year. So Illinois Legal Aid Online is a not-for-profit. We've been around for about 10 years. We're a statewide technology center. We're funded through state, federal grants, foundations, and private donors. Basically, we believe that the web is an effective way to distribute legal information, especially in these times where funding is limited and there's being funding cuts done, and we're forced to do more with less. We manage 4 websites. One which is the general English site that contains about 3,000 pieces of content, which include videos, the auto docs, general articles, legal guides, and then we have another website that provides resources and training for pro bono and volunteers, another website that provides resources for advocates, and then the Spanish website, which would be the 4th website, which is a mirror website of the English website for the general public. Next slide, please. This is just basically some data on just the general perspective of Latinos in Illinois. So Latinos in Illinois represent about 15% of the population. So there's about 2 million Latinos in Illinois. This is just some data that we use to justify the need for the Spanish website. And just kind of coming to, I'm actually originally from LA, and coming to Chicago, I just was really surprised that there wasn't really resources in Spanish online, and even for organizations, legal aid organizations, or organizations that had even their name in Spanish, like Latinos Progresando, you go into the website and you would find not even a description of the organization in Spanish. So yeah, I was really excited to get this project going and make those resources available for folks here. We could go. Thank you. So the project started, was funded through a 2-year TIG, which is coming to an end in January. So we're pretty much done with that part of the program. And basically, the first year was focused on developing the website, just kind of building up the content, deciding what content to include, how to present it, and then the second year would be more focused on promoting the website. And again, still developing content, but trying to get the word out for people to start using the website. When we kicked off the project, we decided that the best way to go about this would be to put together an advisory committee. So that's how we started with this. So we put together what we call the SWAC, or the Spanish Website Advisory Committee. And it included the 3 LSE funded programs, so it's LEP, Prairie State Legal Services, and Land of Lincoln Legal Services. We also included other local organizations that provided services for the Latino community. My organization in particular had never provided really services in Spanish or any other language, so we wanted to make sure that we had partner organizations that had direct contact with the Latino community and that would be able to let us know exactly what legal issues the community was having and what sort of content would be best to include in the website. So we have Latinos Progresando, which is in the heart of the sort of Latino area in Little Village, or La Villita, Catholic Charities, MALDEF, and the NIJC, the National Immigrant Justice Center. Go to the next slide, thank you. And so the result of this first year was ayudalegalillinois.org. That's Esperanza, sort of a spokesperson for the website, which in English means hope. So we thought that was an appropriate name for her. And this is a flyer that we distribute to different organizations to promote the website, which basically has a screenshot of the homepage of Ayuda Legal Illinois. And the way the website works is there's 2 boxes which the user has to fill in. The first one with the legal issue, the second one with the zip code. And the zip code, the purpose of the zip code is so once the person hits search, it'll give a result of the different articles and videos and legal guides that are available on our site. And then with the zip code, it'll provide the appropriate instructions for the person, depending on the county that they're in, as well as information for their organizations, the legal aid organizations that service their area. So that's sort of the purpose of that. Right now, the website has about 300 different content pieces, which again, as I said, include video, automated forms, articles, and legal guides. There, it has a LawHelp feature as well. That, like I say, the little bubble there, click to chat, which is staffed by bilingual volunteers. Mostly, it's volunteers are from our local law schools. And basically the website, again, it's a mirrored version of the English website. It has the same features, the same functionality, but just, you know, in a smaller capacity. We could go to the next slide, please. So here's some information on our top content views. So on the left side, we have the top content views for the Spanish website, and then just comparing what the content views are on the English website. You can see, obviously, the top, you know, the top content pieces are very different, which is definitely something to take into account when you know, when putting together the content for Latinos or for the Hispanic population. The content for the English definitely differs. There's a big difference between both of them, so that's definitely something that should be taken into consideration. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the first part of the project was to develop the website. So we put together the advisory committee. They meet. We have been meeting every other month to sort of go over the content that we want to develop, what sort of issues are going on with the community, and as you could see, the organizations that we picked were, you know, one that was focused, you know, faith-based organization, another one that, again, that was in the heart of the Latino community here in Little Village in Pilsen, another organization, the NIJC, that focuses on immigration issues. So we wanted to get sort of a broad perspective of the issues that our Latino population was having. One of the resources that has helped us to spread the word on Ayuda Legal Illinois throughout the 102 counties in the state is our legal self-help centers, which we started opening in 2006. Basically, this project, the purpose of it was to open a self-help center which included a computer workstation with a printer, access to internet, and a trained personnel that would know how to navigate and use the different resources available on our websites. These self-help centers are housed mostly in public libraries of these counties, but also the courthouses. So it's been basically a project that's been done in collaboration with the local courts, libraries, and just, you know, making sure that they know that, you know, there's a help center, that these resources are available for folks, and also, you know, getting the courthouses to get on board, knowing that people are going to be using the automated forms, and just making sure that, you know, the courts do accept the forms that are being used by folks in these self-help centers. So right now, we are 2 counties from reaching our goal. So we've covered 100 from 102 counties. So we're very, very excited about that. And the other interesting thing that we've done with each of these counties is that we've created sort of a home page for each one of these counties, which is, so it's it's been sort of tailored for each of these counties. And basically what this home page, what it includes is a list of sort of top articles that pop up depending on and sort of the content that pops up in these in the homepage for each county is decided by the local courthouse or the libraries and what they think would be most appropriate or useful. There's also a welcome video where there's the local chief judge that sort of welcomes people and to the website, and so that definitely gives the website more credibility when folks come and use those resources. And we also include brochures at these self-help centers, customized referral resource handouts. If people want those, some people prefer to have those printed out, and a list of automated document forms as well of what we have available on our website. And we could go to the next slide, please. So these are sort of number statistics of what of the usage of the website so far. So like I said, the website launched in January of this year, so we've been live for about 11 months now. And these are the numbers. We've been getting about 5,000 visitors per month. So right now a total of about 46,000. Sort of some interesting data here is the mobile usage. So about 27% of the people coming to our websites have been actually accessing it from mobile devices, which it's really interesting because that in comparison to our English website, that number is only 16%. So it's almost double. And this is despite the fact that our Spanish website does not have a mobile app yet, and the English website does. So this is obviously something that we do have, in our plans to develop. We were working on a mobile app, but we're thinking of actually doing more of a mobile website. So again, we do expect those numbers to increase once we do make that available. And then, as you can see, the bottom pie graph sort of shows what sort of system people are using. So 60% of people who are accessing the website from a mobile device are actually using an Android phone, and 31% would be an iPhone or an iPad sort of tablet. Now, sort of some of the things that we've learned again throughout these 2 years of working on this project. I guess what I would share with folks would be one of the neat sort of characteristics of the way we approached the building of the Merit website was that we incorporated Google Translate into our CMS. So in building the website, we basically made it in a way using Google's API. With a click of a button, Google would basically translate a whole content piece. So and that would mean translating each of the sort of sub areas, the title, and the content, and then I would then go in and clean up the translation. Now, when I started working with Google Translate was very different from when I started to what it is now. I mean, I've seen a significant improvement with just the quality of translations. That said, it's definitely you're not at the point where you can just use it and make it live or hand it out to people, I mean, you definitely need somebody to go in and clean it up and you know, make it suitable for people to use. But we have seen about that it saves about 20% of the time that it would take to start from scratch doing the translation. Another thing that we've learned is in prioritizing the content, initially we based the content that we were using on what the top hits were on the English website. Now, as you saw on the top content hits, it differs very much, so you really have to tailor it to what the Latino community is, in your areas is sort of working with the issues that they're having and what their needs are. Because again, the sort of content that is being viewed on the English website and the Spanish website differ a lot. As far as outreach, we found that the outreach, the SWAC, the Spanish website outreach advisory committee has been extremely helpful. We've done, we've tried to spread the word, with throughout radio, local newspapers, and just doing outreach to the local Latino community and different organizations. And that's pretty much it.
Thank you, Dennis. I am going to transition now to Tony Liu, who is going to share with us some of his experiences in creating Asian Pacific content in some technology decks.
Thanks, Claudia. Okay, hopefully everyone's seeing my screen.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I'll be talking about the brave new world of API languages. API stands for Asian Pacific Islander, generally used to refer to a large group of languages and cultures. And specifically today, I'll be talking about implementing Chinese and Vietnamese in one of our projects here. For those who aren't familiar with Citizenship Works, Citizenship Works is it's a resource for individuals who are longtime lawful permanent residents who are now eligible to apply for naturalization, and it was created to try to address the fact that there's a huge gap between the number of people who are eligible. There's an estimated 8.5 million lawful permanent residents who are eligible to become citizens, and every year only about 750,000 actually apply for citizenship, and every year another million get added to that number of eligible people, so that gap is growing. So there's now a national effort to try to encourage people to take that last step and become U.S. citizens. So the context for why we were implementing these languages, Citizenship Works was originally available in English and then not long after that Spanish, and we wanted to include Chinese, Vietnamese, and Korean, and that's based on national demographics in terms of the immigrant community population that is eligible to become a citizen. When we were preparing to address this and implement Chinese and Vietnamese, we had to contend with the fact that Citizenship Works uses LawHelp Interactive, which in and of itself has three major components: LawHelp Interactive, the website, as well as A to J Author and Hot Docs. We're also using the Pro Bono Net Advocate template, which is the same content management system that you saw John demonstrating earlier. And then we also use a module called Articulate, which basically takes PowerPoint presentations and animates them and turns them into like an interactive learning tool. And that also has a custom skin on Citizenship Works. So those are all the various pieces we were having to deal with in trying to think about how to set this up. So that's basically 4 different platforms, and then a presentation software as well as a custom skin for that software. In addition to that, A to J has both Adobe Flash and HTML display components. HotDocs also uses Adobe Flash. And so a couple of things that, that we learned in this. One thing is that you should never assume that Adobe Flash and HTML are going to display your text the same way. This is particularly true of any non-Roman character languages, non-Roman alphabet languages. And then you shouldn't assume that programs that you're using all use the same version of Flash. And then, there's a general transition towards HTML5 for a lot of web applications and websites, and I think that will promises a much better multilingual online world, because I think as HTML5 grows in adoption, there's going to be one unified sort of technology that will be used to display a lot of various pieces of content, and HTML5 handles Unicode encoding for multilingual characters much better than Adobe Flash currently does. One thing that we learned the hard way is that Chinese doesn't break. What I mean by that is that in written Chinese, there are no spaces. Words are separated by contexts, and then clauses and sentences are separated by punctuation. So the space bar doesn't get used in Chinese, essentially. And then the problem that presents is that what happens when you have multi-line text. So if you have a long paragraph of text, back in the old days of typewriters, you had to insert breaks yourself. We now live in a world of word processing where if you're going to type a long paragraph that's unbroken, you just keep typing, and then the software figures out where to break your line for you. And you can even have the software intelligently hyphenate your words in English for you, based on all the rules that we learned in grade school that I'm sure many kids coming up through the education system today actually probably don't know what those rules are. I've probably forgotten all of them myself. When you're dealing with Chinese text, some applications, some software might actually have something built in to understand where to break those lines. I actually don't know what the rules are in Chinese, despite my many years of studying Chinese. But some software might not. And so what you get might be a line of text that goes off the end of the screen. So the solution that we had to come up with was in our output. So this is a sample PDF from the assembled HotDocs document from the LHI server. We had to actually go into the HotDocs script, the template itself, and manually insert breaks after every single line. And this is tricky when particularly when you have a template developer who doesn't read Chinese. And so, so we actually had to have somebody who could read Chinese, in this case me, go in and go through all of the code that was used to assemble, this particular document, and figure out where to manually put a break in the output. In addition to all of the challenges we were dealing with in the Chinese implementation, the Vietnamese implementation was actually surprisingly more challenging. Surprising in the sense that Chinese is a language composed of thousands of characters, unique characters, as opposed to an alphabet of 26 letters. And so we always imagined that the Chinese implementation would be the more challenging, because just simply the size of the files that need to be added to the software in order to display all those characters. Vietnamese actually kind of proved to be trickier in the sense that while Vietnamese uses the Roman alphabet for the core of its characters, they're all modified with what are called diacritics. So diacritics are little modifying notations and marks. You might call them squiggles or dots or accent marks, things like that, that modify the letters and change them into a different letter in a sense. Anyone who's typed Spanish words will be familiar with the fact that sometimes when you need a particular character with an accent over it, you need to there's a special way of inputting it, right? And that's because there's different ways to encode characters that have those modifying marks. In Vietnamese, there's two ways to do that. One is what are called combined characters, and one way is using what are called pre-combined characters. Combined characters, I'm actually going to skip ahead. But combined characters, so this is an example of a combined character, what you see here on the right. So in inputting this particular this character, one would input the letter Y and then input the code for the modifying mark, and then what the software would then display is the combined character. So in essence, you're actually inputting two different characters, and the result is a single character. A pre-combined character would mean you'd need to know what the code is for that you know, that letter that has the mark on it already, and then you're only inputting one code. HTML, as in our experience with all of the technology we're using, in particularly A2J Author, the HTML components of A2J Author could handle the combined characters, but the Adobe Flash components couldn't. The Adobe Flash components within A2J Author needed the characters to be pre-combined. So it created a big problem for us because our translators used combined characters. They used software that generated combined characters. So the solution for us was we had to find somebody who knew how to address this, and they found a way to normalize the content using special scripts. And then just to illustrate the point, the meanings of words can change if the diacritics are missing. So the sort of the cryptic title of this slide is in reference to the fact that the original text in our interview, in our A2J interview, was you know, it was asking somebody to list all of their residences in the last 5 years. And our language reviewer told us that without the diacritics, because they had been stripped out, the word residence got turned into stupid dwelling. So so getting this right is obviously important. If you're curious about Vietnamese and computing, you can search Wikipedia for combining characters and diacritics, and there's a lot of information there. And then there's a whole long resource specifically about Vietnamese Unicode at the URL that's displayed there. I now know more about diacritics and Vietnamese character entry on computers than I ever thought I would. So just a few takeaways. One of the main things to really kind of pay attention to is that you need to know how all of the various pieces of technology you're using treat character encoding. It's just, you know, something that you might not have ever thought about, the fact that different software might handle the way text is entered differently, and then that's just when you're dealing particularly with languages that don't use the Roman alphabet, that's it's really important. It's really helpful to have bilingual techies. So if you've got developers or people who are doing quality assurance or testing or anything, if they're not bilingual, it's their ability to contribute is, you know, is impaired. So it's really helpful to try to find somebody who can play that role, who can at least understand the language or can, you know, is familiar enough with it to be able to not see it just as pictures. You should really look for help from people with experience. You shouldn't be reinventing the wheel. A lot of people have done this kind of work before, and you really shouldn't assume that users should be able will be able to see everything that you put into your sites or your content. Though HTML5 might solve this, and most modern operating systems like Windows 7, Windows 8, and the Mac operating system already have most of the language packs pre-installed. Although we still do see a lot of Windows XP users that don't have Asian language character sets installed. And then just a couple of project management takeaways. So one thing is that you definitely should not assume you can just copy and paste. And that's really a reference to the fact that you shouldn't assume that all you need is to find somebody who can translate the content, and then you're done, and you just take whatever they give you and you put it into your site and everything's good. You need bilingual resources, and by resources I mean personnel beyond just the translator to review, test, revise, give you advice about something being out of context and doesn't make sense the way it's translated. And you really definitely need to build in time into your project plan to research and test before diving in with unfamiliar language character sets. But all's well that ends well, and here are some screenshots of the Citizenship Works site in Vietnamese and Chinese, and our interviews on LawHelp Interactive with the A to J interface fully translated into Chinese and Vietnamese. So with that, I guess I'll close, and I think we're taking questions later, right?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Tony. So now we're gonna have Liz Keith.
Great, thanks, Claudia.
Sorry.
So I'm just going to talk briefly about a take project that Pro Bono Net is working on in partnership with the Legal Aid Society of Northeastern New York and LawHelp New York this year and into early next year. And the project has 3 overall goals from a language access perspective. The first is to create a Spanish version of the National LawHelp homepage that provides links to all 50 states in the statewide website network. Under this project, this group is also developing 10 nationally relevant online guides in English and Spanish in plain language on basic information about the legal system and language access rights. And then we'll also be piloting LawHelp assistance on the Spanish version of the National LawHelp. So this will be the first launch of a national LawHelp initiative in the legal aid community. So on the next slide, a few key points about the need and the reasons why these partners in Pro Bono Net have undertaken this project. One is that LawHelp.org, as I mentioned, is the national gateway to the entire statewide website network, LawHelp and non-LawHelp sites alike. It's heavily linked to by national organizations, often referenced in the media. Pro Bono Net does our own marketing of that site on behalf of the statewide website network, and it's a top referrer of traffic for a lot of statewide websites, but there's no Spanish language portal to it right now, which makes it more difficult for LEP Spanish-speaking individuals to find their state site and Spanish resources on their local state site. Additionally, I think as states invest in creating Spanish mirror sites like Dennis talked about, and there's national coverage of LawHelp, there's not a direct place for media outlets or other networks to link to that provide that national portal in Spanish. Also in the development of this project, the partners did a scan of the statewide website network and other sources for general plain language information about the legal system and language access rights. And a number of programs have made considerable investments in this area, and we've heard about some of those already from the speakers before me. But what we found is that often it's state-specific, and there are some states and some programs that are still really grappling with providing this kind of content in Spanish. So, so I'll talk a little bit about some of the resources that this project will provide to help those programs. And then lastly, as a result of just systemic gaps in services and resources available in Spanish, it can be especially challenging for individuals to navigate referral systems and find helpful resources on their own. And the LawHelp New York LiveHelp pilot project, which included Spanish LiveHelp, found that visitors to their Spanish mirror site were disproportionately likely to seek LawHelp assistance, and that the kind of help they sought often related to the complexities of the service delivery landscape for individuals that are limited English proficient. So ways in which this initiative will hopefully help fill those needs will be to, as I mentioned, create an enhanced Spanish gateway to the statewide website network. It will also include additional capability beyond what you see here. It will be more robust, but additional capability to highlight the existence of mirror sites in many states, to highlight the plain language guides I mentioned, as well as LawHelp assistance. And on the next slide, this is a very much a preview. What you see on the left, the placeholder photo, which we think is Daniel Craig, but we're not sure, is just that, just a placeholder for now, and that the text in this screenshot is just a placeholder. But the Spanish national page, as I mentioned, will include some additional functionality to spotlight the existence of resources in Spanish on state sites, as well as a map that will provide links to mirror sites where they exist, or Spanish or English sites if the state doesn't have a Spanish mirror site, and some additional context about the existence of resources and information in Spanish in the statewide website network. So throughout the past year, we've coordinated with state projects on a number of aspects of this effort, and much of this work has been conducted by Wilneda Negrin. So early on, she reached out to statewide website coordinators in every state with a survey to gather information about the existence of Spanish mirror sites in those states, as well as what content is available in Spanish. She also researched key state-specific self-help resources that go a little bit beyond statewide websites. And the results of both of those research projects will be used to inform links and content on the national homepage, and also referral information that's used for the national LawHelp. So the 10 plain language guides that are being developed will be posted in English and Spanish to the national LawHelp homepage. They also will be translated into 3 additional languages next year, hopefully relatively early in Q1. And they will be available for any statewide website or program to use or adapt for your own language access efforts or content for your statewide website. So if this is an area where your program has grappled with and just hasn't had the capacity to provide some basic legal information in Spanish or these other languages in the past, this will provide a starter set of 10 plain language resources that you can use and tailor and adapt for your own purposes. And the list of the topics that the guides cover is available here. So we solicited input on these topics in the development of the grant proposal with Legal Aid Society of Northeastern New York, and then again earlier this year, this past spring, we revisited that original list and distributed it to statewide website coordinators, the National Language Access Advocates Network, and other networks to reconfirm that these topics make the most sense and are places where there's a need for these kinds of starter kits in Spanish. And again, these will be translated into those other 3 languages I mentioned. And then the National LawHelp component will be piloted on LawHelp Español early in 2013. It will be staffed by, I think, an innovative staffing partnership which will combine bilingual LawHelp New York law student volunteers with national volunteers that Pro Bono Net is recruiting. So some of these individuals will be based in New York, others will be based in other states throughout the country. We've had interest from a volunteer at an information and library science school, for example, but that the training will be handled and folded into LawHelp New York's existing project. And the kind of assistance will include providing help to users in accessing resources on the National LawHelp site, assistance in navigating to and accessing their state site, and also providing referrals and information where live help is available in English or Spanish locally in their state. So this live help component is not going to provide direct navigation assistance on state sites, but be able to provide support to individuals looking for their state site or trying to understand what resources might be available to help them in the statewide website network. And as one outgrowth of this project, one thing that we're especially excited about is that this will be the third or fourth really volunteer-driven live help model in the community. So there's been some good experience with using volunteers for live help in New York and Illinois and in a couple of other states. But this will give the community, collectively speaking, more experience and a better understanding of what kind of capacity and support is needed to staff volunteer-driven live help projects. And I think that's it. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Liz. Thank you all. We wanted to invite people to ask questions or give us comments or share if you're doing other projects that are using technology and where you're kind of finding how to do the in and out of this. Everybody's muted, but I think that if people want to raise their hand, we can do that. I see that Christina Job had a question. And Christina, I'm going to unmute you. Christina, you're unmuted. Hi.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I don't understand technology, clearly. I just had a question. My question was just about all these materials, if they were like the PowerPoints and the links that you guys are posting on the chat, if we were going to have availability to that either through email or some website where we can download stuff, because it's all really helpful.
Yes, we're going to be posting this in the LSNTAP, and I believe everybody's going to get an email, right? Right, Jillian? With the links to the materials, the presentation, and the recording. So it will be at lsntap.org.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Well, I did have a question for all my co-panelists, and people can take it if they want to share something about it. When these projects are being planned, let's say a technology is being planned, do you think that everybody's planning to have an LEP piece to it? Or are the technology projects mostly being planned primarily for English with no timeline on when the LEP piece will come in? And maybe you can speak from your experience in your own environments. Do you see a lot of people saying, okay, I want to create this tool, and within 2 years I want to have it to meet the needs of this community that we may serve? Or do you think that the LEP piece is more of an afterthought? It's not part of the initial plan?
Well, Claudia, this is Jeff. I think, it's never been, a top issue for me personally, but even someone not surrounded by lots of languages here in our particular program, it's Spanish. And frankly, in our office, it's not that common. I think every project I'm working on has a LEP component, including, I wanted to make a plug for writeclearly.org, where we produce plain language documents, and we added something like, I don't know, there's 20 or 30 documents, including how to use an interpreter and basic legal advice in Spanish, that we just said we ought to do that. So I think the culture is now, I think people are thinking about other language access issues in everything we're doing, in part to meet this big problem we have.
This is Tony. The Immigration Advocates Network, obviously, our audience, our end user audience, probably, like when you think of LEP, it sort of hits squarely in our demographic, and I think we're starting more and more to, I think we've always had the idea that our content would be multilingual. I think one of the things that we're learning now is that even in the design phase of these projects, you have to start thinking about the fact that you'll be displaying things in different languages, so that could impact things like the size of buttons that you're creating. For example, in our mobile app that we're developing right now, that was an issue that we wanted to make sure our designers were aware of, that we're going to have to display Chinese characters and Vietnamese and Korean and other languages, so they can't just design only with English in mind. And I think and a second component to that is it's not just about necessarily being multilingual. If you look at a lot of software that is released in different languages, the developers often talk about localization, and localization is more than just language. It's also about making sure that design and interface and experience is culturally appropriate. And so things like color choices, where in some cultures certain color combinations might have a certain meaning. Those types of things are also, I think, important to consider.
So are there resources online to go and find out or learn more about like localization from a design point of view? Because I know it's also a term in the machine or MT that Jeff was talking about.
I'm not aware of any, but I'm
Okay.
certain we could probably put some together. I'm sure there are a lot out there.
And let's say that a group it's pretty good at creating online content in English and online tools in English, and they're gonna jump into their first LEP project. And let's make it a little harder, and let's say that in that community it is not a Roman language. What would all of you advise them in terms of how long to give themselves? Do they finish the English site first? Do they leave themselves open for a different design for that target language? And how much more do they budget for that, both time-wise and resource-wise? Any thoughts or word of wisdoms?
It's really hard unless you have quite a few, at least bilingual people working on the project. I would still probably always start with the English component of any project, just to solve all the other problems that you need to solve before you add another component. Although, for instance, I think it's Illinois Legal Aid Online that's experimenting with having, for instance, in the A2J interview, rather than a separate interview, having Spanish displayed along, in the same interview. So I think we're constantly reinventing ways to make additional languages easy. And, sometimes you're really doubling the scope of your project. Now I'm scared to heck that we're going to publish an A2J interview in English and Spanish, for instance. I mean, that's our most popular threshold language in New York. And then we're going to forget to update, the Spanish one when we go update the English one. So it's a real, it's definitely another burden. But we build in, translation costs into our projects as well.
Okay, let's see if we have any other questions from our audience. I don't know if there are any to read out.
Claudia, we have one from Jason.
Okay, Jason, go ahead. Yeah, that'll be great.
So his question is, have you had success with LawHelp models in terms of helping LEP clients while utilizing volunteers with non-English language skills?
Liz, do you want to speak to that?
Sure, that's a great question. There are several LawHelp projects that provide assistance in Spanish. Right now, the two that are volunteer-driven that are providing more or less full-time assistance in Spanish are New York and Illinois, I believe, and I know more about New York's model. Dennis may have some insight into Illinois, but in New York, they are using law student volunteers, including bilingual law student volunteers, and they have a pretty robust recruitment and training program, as well as partnerships with area law students now around that. So I think the ability to recruit bilingual volunteers ebbs and flows from year to year. But LawHelp New York also has a couple of bilingual people on staff who also help support and kind of backfill that service when volunteers aren't available. And I do think that we've seen in some evaluations of LawHelp projects that the ability to get personalized assistance, I think in particular, if you're LEP and confronted with a largely monolingual service delivery system, getting that kind of real-time personalized assistance and understanding what resources are available can really have a really important value and be really beneficial in helping somebody get to the next stage of their process or know where to turn to next.
Okay, thank you, Liz. We have a question from John Simpson, who is in British Columbia, and I'm always very fascinated as to how they approach language access in Canada. So John, if you don't mind, I will unmute you so you can share your comment with the rest of the audience and maybe give a brief little background. John?
Yep, you hearing me?
Yes, yes, thank you.
Oh, okay, good. Well, I'm with the Legal Services Society in BC, and we developed a mobile website, not an app. We had the same discussion that was raised earlier about whether to go with an app or a website. I still have questions about whether we made the right choice, but we went with a website. And it's a limited, stripped down amount of information. We only have 28 items on the website, but it's very basic stuff about contact information, links to phone numbers, maps, qualifications, financial eligibility, all that stuff, coverage for legal aid. And we're thinking about translating it into different languages. And in BC, of course, particularly the lower mainland around Vancouver, it's an international city. 54% of the population here speaks first language other than English at home. And the top languages, of course, are Chinese, Punjabi, Spanish. So we're very conscious of the fact that we have an extremely diverse audience in the metropolitan area, which accounts for about half of the population of the province. We've got about 4.3 million people here. About 2 million live in the lower mainland. And we have to respond to those needs. We have a lot of print publications in different languages. And now we're looking at what we can do with our websites to make them more accessible, because we know that a lot of people want to get the information in their own language. The other thing that we're hearing is, and this was raised earlier, is that different populations have different approaches to how they access information. And we know that a lot of people from Asia are very comfortable using a smartphone to access information on the internet, more so than sitting down at a computer. And so we're thinking about that as well, like the different populations access information in different ways. So that's sort of where we're at the moment.
Yeah, it'll be great if you keep us posted so that we can keep sharing and learning from each other. The
PLEI Connects group, which is kind of like LSNTAP in Canada.
Okay.
They, you know, Brenda Rose, Claudia.
Yes.
They just had a webinar last week on much the same topic, translating websites. So you might want to connect with her about that.
Okay, thanks for sharing that. We'll add, we may add that to the LSNTAP as a link.
Yeah.
Okay,
thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Jada, Charlie, I know that you have a question or comment about working with other agencies. Once legal aid gets to be multilingual and provides language and tools, how to get that through to other agencies and courts. Don't know if you want to kind of, I'm going to unmute you so you can see if other people are figuring out on that more downstream collaboration. You're unmuted. Jada? Okay. I guess she's not She may be on mute herself. I know that there is right now at least some activity going on with the courts on language access, and there is a website, and we can share that also as part of the materials. And there was recently a conference in Texas, I believe in August, and all of the courts are working on language access plans to come into compliance with Title VI or improve on their Title VI pathway to success. So I think that continuing to create the materials and share as much as possible it's a way to improve language access, not just within legal aid, but eventually with other community-based organizations, other nonprofits or government agencies. We are coming close to the time. Any other questions or comments from the audience or from our presenters before we wrap up? Okay, well, thank you all for staying with us, all our attendees for spending this hour and a half with us, and thank you to all our panelists for sharing the work that they have been doing, months and months of work and a lot of effort, and distilling that into 15 minutes and sharing it broadly so that hopefully others will get inspired and will have a little bit of light as they start these projects to bring language access to technology to low-income and underserved communities. So thank you, everyone, and please share this widely with others so that others can have access to this presentation. I did want to make a plug. I believe that there is a machine translation specific LSNTAP webinar coming up on the 14th. So for those of you who want to kind of wrap your head around a little bit more on machine translation, I encourage you to sign up for that part of the series. It's going to be a good one. So thank you so much, and have a good afternoon.
Thanks, Claudia.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.